Acadia was a French colony until the 1713 Treaty of Utrecht gave part of Acadia, current-day Nova Scotia, to the British. The Acadians were the French-speaking people of Acadia. The treaty allowed for the Acadians to move to other places in New France. The British urged them to leave because the increase of the French population would mean that they would be more vulnerable in future attacks. But the Acadians did not want to leave their farms and establishments behind. Their land was important to them. In 1730, the British and Acadians came to an agreement. The Acadians were allowed to practice Catholicism as long as they signed an oath declaring their loyalty to the British King George II. The British agreed that the Acadians would not have to fight the French. They wanted to remain neutral, which means they did not want to pick sides. Tensions grew, and in 1755, Governor Charles Lawrence demanded that the Acadians sign an oath of allegiance, meaning they would need to help fight the French in the case of a war. The Acadians refused. That same year, Britain ordered the expulsion of the Acadians. As many as 10,000 Acadians were rounded up and deported. Families were separated and in most cases never reunited. Some managed to escape into the forest and stay with the French and First Nations communities. Others died of exposure or starvation while hiding. Almost one-third of the people forced onto ships died before reaching their destinations. After the Acadians were removed, the British burnt down their homes and destroyed their farms so that the Acadians would have no reason to return. But why did the expulsion take place? For one, Catholics and Protestants did not get along. Most British people were Protestants and the Acadians were Catholic, so the religious tension had always been an underlying issue. The British also needed more land as the population grew. Few British settlers wanted to live in Acadia because the Acadians already took the best farmland areas. The Acadians benefited the land by working hard to drain the marshes, created fertile farmland, and produced enough food as farmers to provide for themselves and to sell to the French and British. Finally, there was the issue of trust. Leading up to the expulsion, the British already felt threatened by the First Nations who were fighting to defend their land against British settlement. They also felt threatened by the Acadians and the French, whom they did not trust. The Micmac and Malecite people were allies of the French. They did not agree with the transfer of land to the British and saw it as illegal. So, in 1749, when the British built a fortress at Halifax, which belonged to the Micmac and Malecite, they were not happy. The British tried to negotiate, but the First Nations wanted nothing to do with them. They began fighting in hopes that they would drive the other away. The Micmac took more than 1,000 British settlers, many of them children. Acadians had close ties with the Micmac and First Nations, which is also why the British felt as though they could not be trusted. Joseph Broussard was one of the most active leaders of the Acadian resistance. In 1751, he led an attack in the town of Dartmouth called the Dartmouth Massacre, where his forces killed 20 British villagers and burnt down 36 homes. He also helped support and defend Fort Beauséjour, which was built by the French in 1751 on the land that both the French and British claimed. A lot of the Acadians settled in New Orleans, Louisiana. The people living here were French-speaking Catholics. In 1764, the British allowed the Acadians to return to Acadia. Nearly 3,000 Acadians returned, but by then their land was given to British settlers.
Created using Powtoon.